Releasing in Australian cinemas on November 7th is a documentary called The Pool, and it's my great pleasure to talk to the director of The Pool, Ian Darling. Ian, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thanks so much, Peter. Great to chat with you again.
Now, I was so impressed with your documentary, The Final Quarter, which did very well. How did The Pool come about?
It's an interesting one. Typically, I've made films about things I've had a strong connection with. So, with the final quarter, I'm a AFL fan, and living in Sydney, I used to see the Sydney Swans the whole time, and we were thinking in the final few years of Adam Goodes' career of doing a film about his sunset years, and it ended up being a very different film. But I had that connection, and swimming's my main sort of recreational sport. I'm not a competitive swimmer, but I swim about 5 or 6 times a week. And after COVID, I was looking at perhaps shifting from typically having made some pretty heavy social impact documentaries. I was looking at doing something that would perhaps bring a bit more joy to people's lives and to audiences. And I was sitting at Icebergs one day with a friend of mine, Margie Simpson Lee, who's a regular at Icebergs, and I said, I'm looking at doing a positive story, and she said, well, what about icebergs? And it was right under my nose, and I thought, actually, that has all the elements I'm looking for, because I was looking at something that would show the importance of community and connection. Because coming out of COVID, we had that taken away from us, and it just suddenly seemed to be something that we valued even more highly. So that was the start of the genesis of the film.
Yes, it's Bondi Icebergs, and I must say you found some really fascinating people to talk to, the community that swims there, and so on. So, how easy was it to get these people involved and to talk to camera and to tell their stories?
We actually thought it was going to be much more difficult because people are, vulnerable when they're just in their swimmers, but actually it proved to be sort of the opposite. And we had a couple of projects going. One is we wanted to interview about 100 of the members just as a history project, and it was through those full-length interviews, which aren't in the film, that we started to get a sense of who was who and what the community was. And from that, we actually, in terms of choosing the characters, it was more choosing people that represented sort of different themes that would give us an idea of who the community was. So rather than choosing someone and trying to get into their backstory, we chose someone because they represented mental health or fear or family or depression or uh, even routine. That there are a couple of friends who get there and swim at 13 minutes to 7 every morning, and so it was getting that sort of makeup. And once we'd sort of we filmed over the course of a year, and over it was about 100 days. Um, we actually became accepted very quickly, so people were trusting of us. And I think over the whole year, only about 3 people said they didn't want to be filmed. It was sort of quite the opposite, that we had more people worried that they weren't going to be in the film than those who didn't want to be on screen. So yeah, so I think it was just by being there. We knew the people who turned up at 5:30 in the morning. We saw who got into the 6 o'clock squad. We got a sense of who was doing gym at certain times. And so, people follow patterns, and that made it much easier to identify sort of who was who at different times of the day.
Ah, how very interesting. Now, the film is beautifully shot. There are some great scenes above and below the pool there, and I can imagine there were some logistical issues too about getting cameras in there and shooting it all.
Yeah, we used about 7 different cameras, and it was a completely an outdoor shoot. And the main camera we had was a Sony Venice, which is that high-end camera that shot Flower Moon and Maverick, Top Gun. So we were dealing with a pretty impressive piece of equipment mainly. And we had to be so careful not only of the salt, but of unexpected waves that our cinematographer, Ben Cunningham, he's a wildlife photographer. And so he's well versed at, needing to capture things quickly. But we had a few very close calls where these unexpected waves came and we literally had to run with the camera. But that was the main one. We used a few drones. We used two different underwater cameras. We used a specific camera that shot at 1,000 frames per second, so that there were some beautiful slow motion butterfly scenes where you can see all the driplets coming off. So we found we needed to use, yeah, a number of different cameras, but it was far more challenging, Peter, than we imagined, both with capturing what we wanted, but also the sound that because we typically just had one single radio boom. We couldn't use radio mics on people because they were in the water, and so sound was a really difficult one. And we had a huge sound mix in post where we literally found every single wave that represented what we saw, or just even the sound of a single swimmer. We wanted to capture the breath at times. So it went from raging storms to just a single breath. And so we had to do an enormous amount to keep it exactly what we heard in post as well.
Yes, yes. I was going to remark on the sound design, which is superb, and the use of music as well. There's a lot of behind the scenes work there.
Well, I guess when you start a film, as you've got sort of a clean canvas, and we wondered what the music would be that would suit the flavor of it. And when we sort of thought about the 1960s, and the fact that not only beach and surf culture started in the 60s, but that was when we started to get Australian versions of the Beach Boys, like the Atlantics. And so we thought the 60s would actually serve a couple of purposes. One is it would enable us to keep it positive and light, and the music, because it was guitar driven, was very much the rhythm of the waves, and we wanted the rhythm of the music to be in sync with what we were seeing. But also, when we thought of the decades, whilst we think of the 60s as often being this colourful, happy decade, it was also a decade full of protests and nuclear threats and assassinations and wars and uncertainty. And we felt that actually was perhaps a decade that reflected most closely where we are now. And even within great moments of discomfort, there are these pockets of joy. And for us, Bondi Icebergs or any of these pools or communities, for so many people, represented these very important positive sort of pockets of joy, and that's where we felt it was appropriate for that music. But the other thing our music composer and designer Paul Charlier did is he found every track is very much led by a guitar. And even there's a piece that Jean-Baptiste Lully did in 1658, which is a beautiful Baroque choral piece. And that was the first piece we understand where guitar was used in a Baroque piece historically. So we thought actually that fits beautifully as well. So guitar and 60s is very much a thread through the film, which we kept going with the font that we've used, and also the color grade was very much sort of the 60s as well, to keep the sort of the happiness and lightness and joy in the film.
Okay. Oh, very well done. Now, a lot of the issue of making a documentary is, of course, then fashioning it in the final edit. Of course, I can imagine there would have been a lot of hand-wringing or whatever about what remained in the final version of the film, the stories that remained, and all that sort of thing.
Um, it was perhaps the most challenging element, Peter, because we're used to making, films with a three-act structure and some sort of narrative arc, and we thought let's break all the rules and not do that. And in many of our films, we've chosen five or six characters and gone deeply into their backstories, and we thought let's let's be brave and make the central character the pool. That's the first time we've ever had a central character that's actually a structure rather than a human being. But it actually had so many different personalities that we thought, if we make the central character the pool and use the participants or the characters of ways of explaining all the different participants or people who use the pool, that will give us clues. So with the edit, we thought initially we thought it was going to be quite seasonal, but Sydney being Sydney at that time, it was a very dry, sunny winter and a very wet, stormy summer. So the traditional notion of a differential between winter and summer just didn't work. So with the structure of the pool, we put the storms and the grey and the rain all together. There's a huge storm as you saw in the film. That was actually a summer storm, but it gives very much the impression of sort of the winter grey. And we positioned that about two-thirds of the way through the film because at the end of the storm, there was this incredible rainbow that goes from North Bondi to South. And we felt that that sort of metaphorically was one of those things that when something's being threatened, we needed hope. And so that was sort of the notion that actually even after this destructive storm, there's hope. And from that point on in the film, virtually every scene is sunny and it enables us to go out, feeling more positive. But there are a few structural things like that. Also, we felt that in between the comments of the characters, we wanted to have these gentler meditative scenes that would just enable people to reflect on their own sort of lives and their sense of community and what may be lacking or what may be the most positive, rewarding elements of their own lives. So there were quite a few of those moments where people can just reflect. And it was interesting after one of our screenings at the Sydney Film Festival, a lady in probably her 70s came over to me and she had tears in her eyes and she said, "Oh, during one of those scenes, it just took me to a place, to my own book club. And it made me realize that you've made a film actually about my book club. And it spoke to me in ways I didn't expect." And she wasn't a swimmer, but she really connected with the way the film questioned your own place in a community. And I that was really unexpected from our perspective. And I loved getting that sort of feedback. And it's happened a number of times where people are talking about whatever it is their community that they're a part of, whether it's their local church or their local book club or a running club or even because we've come across a lot of cinema goers, that people who love film festivals or who have movie clubs or listen regularly to people talking about cinema, such as yourself. That gives them a sense of connection as well. And I think that it's so true. We're all yearning to find something that where we find our own sort of peeps, so to speak, and value that very highly.
That is great, getting those reactions and making those transferable responses to other situations and so on. I'm wondering, that's great to hear that. The people in the film, they've obviously seen the film, I would assume, and how have they responded?
It was quite an emotional response, actually. I think in two respects, they feel very grateful that we've captured this moment in time. I mean, once everyone gets over the fact they're very self-conscious when they see themselves in a film, but when they saw that it was, I think a lot of people perhaps think it's going to be a history, but we sort of explained that it's not. It's this moment in time. And
Mm.
once they see the rhythm of the film and how we've just captured snapshots of everyone who represents that community, they really got it and embraced it. And I feel also a few of the key participants, three of them, the coach Neil Rogers, Ted Wilde, and Jimmy Robison, who were all in their 70s and 80s. They died about 3 months before the film was screened. They all had the opportunity to see it. And I think that brought up a lot of emotion with the local community too. And it made them appreciate even more how important it was to capture that moment in time. And I think it made everyone realize too that in a community, you're going to have all these different areas, that you are going to have deaths and you are going to have births and people will have accidents and there'll be people who have incredible moments of joy. And that's what a community is. And in many ways, I think the film brought them even closer together,
Mm.
and that they saw this was, representative of all these communities who have to share the wins together, but also have to comfort each other during times of great loss.
Very much a humanity-based documentary, and yeah, so congratulations on that. It's really well done. Now, the film releases nationally on November 7th in Australia. I assume it also will have some overseas currency.
We're hoping that I think we've been given great heart when we've been showing it around Australia that it's not just a Sydney story, that it is more of a universal one. And I
Mm.
think when one looks at participation rates in swimming as well as community, swimming is sort of one of the top two or three sports in the US and the UK and around Europe. So next year we're hoping to sort of find places to launch it. And I think in two ways, people still like Aussie stories, and it's very much an Australian story, unashamedly. But I think there'll be enough connection with the swimming and the community that hopefully overseas audiences will respond as well.
Well, congratulations on the film, Ian. It's an excellent documentary, and I'm sure it will appeal to a number of people and get them talking as well, which is a good aim for a documentary.
Absolutely. I think with all of those things, we want people to reflect on it. So here's hoping. You never know, how a film's going to be released, and documentaries are tough at cinemas, but we know a lot of people are already making plans to come and see it as a shared experience and to watch it together, which is fabulous.
Excellent
So
stuff. Yeah,
great.
yeah. So, Ian, I'm intrigued. Are you working on another film at the moment?
We are. We're making a film down in Kangaroo Valley, and the working title's The Valley, and we've done about 100 days filming there, and it's very much like a Frederick Wiseman type film that we're just observing, and whether it's going to be 3 hours long or not, Peter, I'm not sure, but we're very much observing again people in a rural community, and it's quite interesting because unlike the pool where everyone's there and they swim and they're all talking, people in rural communities spend a lot of time in silence and by themselves. And then it also highlights, because of that, how much they need to come together, and whether it's for local karaoke nights, or to go to the store and chat with the store owners, or have a church experience, or go to the local show. That again, we're social creatures, and a lot of these themes are coming out, that we can have solitary lives, but we all very much need this sense of connection and community. So we're very excited about this film. It'll be very different, and as I say, who knows, maybe it is a 3 hour cut. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Right.
looking forward to that. It sounds great.
Fabulous.
We've
Right.
been we've been speaking to Ian Darling, who is the director of The Pool, releasing in Australian cinemas on November 7th. Ian, thank you so much for talking with me.
Oh, fabulous to chat with you, Peter. Thanks so much.
All the best. Bye bye.
Great.